Hi, I'm Dr. Sophia Omoro, owner and designer of Odaomo. I welcome you to today's episode of Conversations with Odaomo Beyond the Beautiful Things. Today, Tracy and Annabel will walk us through the power of togetherness, especially as African brands. Please stay to the end for my wrap up. See you soon.
Tracy Kebetta. You're very passionate about a collective, collaborative voice for African fashion brands, which is very unique for you because you have worked with very many notable brands in New York City, right?
Correct.
You trained at Saks Fifth Avenue. You were a buyer at Bloomingdale's. You were director of strategic planning at Opening Ceremony.
Correct.
And a director of planning at Coach. You were a strategic planner at Michael Kors, and you're currently back at Coach, overseeing the North American division in some capacity, right?
That's correct.
So you've been deeply immersed in what is generally considered to be, by the world, to be mainstream fashion, correct?
That's correct, yes. Especially in the US, of course, which leads the charge on fashion. It's been that way.
So tell us just very briefly about that experience. I mean, it's years and years of experience in New York. Just kind of summarize it, your feelings, your thoughts about the industry in general.
Well, in summation, you know, when people hear that you work for fashion in New York City, they think it's all glitz and glamour. And it really isn't. I got the job primarily because I had such a business background. I went to school for investment banking and finance. And I actually had a very brief stint before I went into the training program at Goldman Sachs. So when I had got the job, the number one prerequisite was, are you analytical and do you like numbers? So it turns out to be sort of so contradictory that in fashion, you do need to have an awareness of how numbers work, because at the end of the day, you're there to build a business.
Sure.
So forget that you're looking at what's in season, what colors are people buying, what silhouettes are amazing. You're still bringing all that together onto spreadsheets to look at numerics and create an analysis from that. So it's about you being able to interpret trends based off statistical inferences. Yeah. So in summary, it really it isn't as glamorous as you think it is. It's a very invoice, Excel based type of environment. And that's the common misunderstanding about working in fashion, especially in New York City. So hopefully that's a good summary, but and with that being said, and even the little snippets I've had of insight into Paris and London has been the same. It's really, what do you bring to the table? What can you verify and validate from a numerics point of view? And then you're like, oh, well, next week is Fashion Week. But at the end of Fashion Week and having that glamorous experience, it's like, well, how much did that cost us?
And how do we monetize moving forward?
Precisely.
How do we capture the value of what just happened?
Precisely. And, 2020 has illustrated that, especially for environments of luxury fashion. Very recently, a brand that I'm very near and dear to, because it's owned by a Black woman, Kushni, was closing her doors. And, you know, you read her interview and she's saying, well, my distribution just kind of shut down, which means consequently I shut down. And by her distribution, she's talking about department stores. So you realize it's all interconnected. If one person isn't making the money, eventually you'll stop making money. So in summation to your question, it's really about, if it doesn't make dollars, then it doesn't make sense. And it's not quite as pretty.
So that brings us to your new baby, which you've developed here, Trademode, right? Tell us about Trademode.
I'm glad we get to talk about this. So in developing Trademode, what I've realized is there's a gap, there's a white space to fill. And in terms of that white space, it's about building a directory. It's essentially a directory of alerting an audience that they are these beautiful things, there's this amazing product available, just products synonymous with what comes out of Paris, what comes out of New York, what comes out of London. And it's all out of the continent. And the one thing that I found that has been challenging in the continent is that symbiotic relationship of working together. So I'm creating that directory where I bring all these people onto one space, sort of a virtual showroom, if you will. A virtual showroom that highlights the best of us. I know behind the scenes, there's all these numbers that we're also running, and we're like, why aren't we generating more traffic? And most people are like, well, there has to be consistency. So you have to at least have 3-5 posts a day, or, you know, 10 posts a month, and we're dealing with that. But the idea is we are relentless in terms of positioning and in terms of interfacing. It has to be beautiful. It has to be just as competitive as the European market product.
So Trademode is a platform that can provide mentorship to African brands, not just Kenyan brands, but other African fashion brands.
Other African brands. That's how we started off, actually. We started off doing some consulting for Nigerian brands who I met locally in Kenya. Yeah. And they harnessed and they got our knowledge. And I thought to myself, it's like, well, if they could be so advanced and still need a little bit of what we have to do, we can implement that to Kenyan brands as well. So that's actually how it started off. I'm glad you know the history.
And so you can show these African brands a pathway into international markets based on your experience.
Correct. In terms of creating lookbooks, ideal pricing, delivery, lead time, and the operations that go behind the scenes for you to be deemed a serious business. Sure. Because the worst thing is to be all glitz and glamour on, you know, your social media platforms. And then when a customer places an order, it's like, well, we'll kind of get that to you when we get it to you. That does not create, you know, a serious connotation in buyers' minds. It's like, oh God, I'm going to end up placing 50 units of this and use up my open to buy, and I'll never see the product. And you actually even run into that problem with American brands and European brands. And that's just a big X. That's a big no. Yeah.
So is there a perception in these international markets that you know so well about African brands and maybe the quality of products that they can supply, or the systems for supplying those products? I mean, why are African fashion brands so underrepresented in, you know, Bloomingdale, Saks? Where's the disparity there? Why?
That's an excellent question. And the number one cause for that comes to mind is supply chain. Mm-hmm. It really isn't about aesthetics, because some of the aesthetics, you know, you'll find European brands that actually shoot campaigns on the continent. Mm-hmm. So our aesthetics are just as good. The biggest hindrance is supply chain. Mm-hmm. When brands need to deal with customs, and then you have to tack on those customs and duties, and then that's now being absorbed on the other end. And then that means, my goodness, that's eating into the margin and my suggested retail price. That becomes an issue. And not even just in shipping, but also in lead time fulfillment. I found that with a lot of the Nigerian brands that we were working with, production was a huge issue. So somebody's running a sort of a 5 to 10 man factory, and one day their artisans don't come in, either because they can't make it. Really, really foundational African problems, like they can't make it to work, which means that this is going to now be set back another 3 to 4 days, but that's all days that lead up to selling time. And the person on the other hand, on the other side, doesn't want to hear about those issues or concerns. They just want their product on the 15th of the month.
Sure.
That's what they bartered for. That's what they've agreed to. And when you run into those problems, it just kind of creates a lack of trust between two parties. And unfortunately, when you're on the other end, it's like you have one bad experience with an African brand. It becomes the theme for all other African brands.
Oh, no.
So it's unfortunate. So that's why it's imperative that when brands cross over to the other side, that they're all singing a symbiotic tune. Like they all have their supply chain in check.
So you're talking about synergizing within the continent so that all African brands have, a plan. There are maybe regulations and there's a plan so that when, there are international buyers, there aren't all these hurdles and pitfalls, and that we're better able to expose ourselves to the international market.
And if you find sort of a peer who's falling behind, just for the sake of your own reputation, the onus is on us to pull them up. And I want to give an example of the Swedish market. All of a sudden, the Swedish market just started making all these waves in the fashion industry with brands like Acne, Johnny, brands that are now becoming internationally known. And what they did is that they came together and formed a coalition that said, if you can't produce, I'll help you produce. Mm-hmm. If you can't ship and get it to customs, I'm going to help you, because Johnny, I need to sell the same platforms that you do. And if you don't ship, they're going to give me essentially the side eye of, oh, you're shipping from Sweden? Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? We'll think about it. We'll think about it some other time. But they came together and they formed sort of this union, so to speak. And they said, no. We're going to help each other on all single facets of this thing to get our product across the water.
Let's take that example to, for example, Nigeria. You'd mentioned Nigeria and you have some experience with Nigerian brands. And as we all know, Nigeria is very well known for sharing resources within the creative industry, not just in fashion, but whether it's music or sports, dance, like whatever they do, they have this very collaborative ethic. So, they take each other with them to wherever they're going. And so that makes them very globally well known, respected, and it also makes them very prolific, don't you think? Because there's so much opportunity for them.
I could have put it better myself. I sat through a dinner where they had Nigerian influencers, and I had nothing to say. And in summation, they're like, well, let's have the Kenyan who's sort of like an outsider tell us what they think we're doing right. And you just hit the nail on the head. I was like, between the emergence of a Burna Boy, at the same time, there's the Nike Art Collective. At the same time, there's Lisa Folawio, who's now doing, Vogue and all these other editorials. It's like, it was such a symbiotic relationship of each one of them pulling the other up. Yes. And then, it also helped matters that Naomi was such a champion for Nigerian creativity. Then Skepta also as pioneer of Trill Hop. I didn't even know what Trill Hop was.
I've never even heard of that.
But again, I've never heard of Trill Hop. I was like, what is Trill Hop? It's like a fusion of house music and hip hop music. And then he put that on the map, and he's Nigerian.
And I would add that another point about Nigeria that is so, that makes them really trailblazers is the fact that they're really invested in their own traditional culture in a way that's very unique. They do it so well. They're such a loud voice, celebrating who they really are authentically. And I think the world, recognizes that about them, I don't know, I mean, in Kenya, obviously, we're a lot more muted in that perspective. I don't know if it's our colonial history that differs from there. But just this celebration of their traditions that shines so through all their creative pursuits that really makes them very special.
I concur. A few days ago, there's a Vogue article in light of the aftermath of SARS, of different Nigerians across the globe and what fuels Nigerians to really get to the forefront of things. And one of the things they talked about in the article was there are no opportunities back home. And hence, when they are given that opportunity outside of Nigeria, they take it and they run with it. And I found that so interesting because, be it in acting, be it in Hollywood, there's that new emerging guy, Damson Idris, who's the face of Harrods now. And he's just young, 26, 27-year-old guy that was given this acting opportunity and is like, I'm taking it and completely reaching the top with it. But along the way, I'm going to dress in Nigerian brands as I get all this exposure. So, I'm not saying that Kenyans don't do the same, but I always find the difference between Nigerians and Kenyans sometimes is we get immersed and absorbed into other cultures very easily.
Right.
And sort of forget our foundation.
Exactly.
And I don't know if that comes from, little snippets of, we're not even really known for a national dress, except perhaps the Maasai. Whereas, you go to an event and you see the gele, you're like, oh, there's some Nigerians in it.
Exactly. I would say it's just a colonial history, I mean, West Africans, obviously that, their whole slavery history, the Francophone colonization as opposed to us, where somehow the British, erased the love for, where we came from, our traditional cultures. I mean, it's really a shame, but, there's still a way that we can, go the other way and take it all back.
Absolutely. And you and I had a sidebar conversation. This is the longest amount of time I've spent in Kenya. And while I've been here, I've really taken the initiative to, go to see artisans, go see little stores. And to your point, we really can take it all back because there's so much authenticity here. Not only authenticity, but there's so much production power here. There's just a slew of people who are so well versed on how to create product authentically, well-made garments, well-made pottery, just well-made stuff. So all these facets came together, and that's why Nigeria now is beginning to get this respect about their creative platform. And it makes you realize that fashion can't work in isolation. It's symbiotic. We need beauty, we need art, we need music to, it's not like you're like right now you look lovely. You're wearing this amazing fashion piece. However, you need somewhere to go. So there need to be other luxury spaces that emerge with fashion that allow fashion to showcase itself. So, you need hotels, you need events, you need venues. So that's how it all comes together.
You were talking about this sort of synergy and cross collaboration. I mean, in Kenya with, over 40 different tribes, there's such a diversity here to be mined, not just in fashion. I mean, collaborating, out of the States this week, I see how Vivienne Westwood has now collaborated with Eastpak, the backpack, how Dolce & Gabbana are now making their branding wine. So there's so much opportunity for fashion brands to collaborate way beyond the fashion space, in a way I think that speaks to the future of fashion, where there just really needs to be this diversification and this cross collaboration.
Absolutely. You really hit the nail on the head. And that's really what's going to get the exposure of an industry, of other industries, and bring it and really, really corral it and bring it together. So I'd like to see like collaborations of that sort. I'd like to see the Maasai sandals, collaborate with the bags and say, hey, we're bringing that skill set into creating a luggage brand. Or, I'd like to see the wine industry come in and say, hey, we're building pouches with, Sandstorm, and, you get a wine and you get this little beautiful pouch.
Yeah.
It can be it can be so variable. There's so many variables to it.
That's the future of fashion, right? Is dynamism, thinking outside of the box.
Yes. And, with fashion, if you track and look at the history of fashion, with the baby boomers, people may not say this was fashion, but it was. Baby boomers would wear the skirt suits and their sneakers, the chunky sneakers that look like the loaves of bread. You remember the movies from the 1980s or 1990s?
Yeah.
And those were big businesses. People would come in and they would leave out of there with those shoes, and the guys would all wear chinos to work. Hence the rise of companies like the Gap. Gap is really built on the back of chinos, and baby boomer generation were having to wear that to work. And then you saw that change into millennials, who were now they're in Silicon Valley and they don't need to wear suits. And then you saw the emergence of casual wear now. And then now we moved on to Gen Z, and we've got this Corona thing. And now you're seeing the emergence of loungewear.
Yes.
So the important thing is, your point is creating dynamic spaces that move with the times. People now they can travel, they can live anywhere, they can work behind the computer. It doesn't mean that they need to compromise what they look like or what their lifestyle and experiences are. But we just now have to work with the current status. And if we really hone in on that and then collaborate, we'll be so far ahead of the game.
Tracy, thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for your time. We wish you the best of luck for this good work you're doing with Trademode.
Thank you.
And let's chat more about it soon, in person, hopefully soon.
I look forward to seeing you, as always.
And don't go back to New York. Stay with us. Stay with us.
Fingers crossed.
Bye, sweetheart. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy and Annabel, for giving us your insight on this wonderfully powerful topic of the importance of working together, especially as African brands, in search of a collective voice on a global platform. I feel that some of us brands sometimes visualize our brands as a slice of one large pie, whereby if my slice is too large, then it takes away from another's. I tend to think of it rather as individual pies there for the taking. But these individual pies, of which each brand can have 100%, when presented together at a table, makes a beautiful banquet. Thank you, and join us for the next episode. See you soon.